All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. And in this video, Errol Spence Jr. could get the last laugh on Terence Crawford, says an expert, because Canelo might very well turn Terence Crawford into Roy Jones 2.0. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, let me take you down memory lane. Back in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, there was a fighter that came around named Roy Jones Jr. Roy Jones Jr. was the best fighter in the world. He was fighting at the same time Floyd Mayweather Jr. was fighting, but it was consensus that the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world was Roy Jones Jr. The job that he had done on several fighters, being undefeated, even though, yeah, he got that little bit of a hiccup where he hit Montel Griffith. Hit Montel Griffith, while he had knocked him down and they disqualified him. But short of that, he was undisputed. He was undefeated. And he decided that he was going to go from 175 pounds to heavyweight to fight John Ruiz. I was at the fight, terrific fight. Man, let me tell you, Roy Jones Jr. left hook to the body was one of the loudest sounds I've heard in a boxing ring, in having watched a boxing match live. Now, what happened to Roy Jones Jr. after that fight? He moved back down to 175, and his career was never the same. He got knocked out by Antonio Tarver. He got knocked out by Glenoff Johnson, the Road Warrior in Memphis, Tennessee, for another fight that I was at. And then you saw him get knocked out several more times, right? Many people associated that with him muscling up to get to 175, number one, he had to muscle up to get to 175. He had to muscle up even more to get to heavyweight, where he weighed in at the high 190s. I saw him that weekend. He was a little guy. Compared to me, Roy Jones Jr. is a smaller guy. So what does this say? It says sometimes you can go up in weight, but you can't come back down. When you go up in weight, you can't come back down. Most people cannot come back down. If you look at Henry Armstrong when he won titles at 126, 135, and 147 all in the same year, he never weighed much more than 126. Even to fight at 147, he was still in his low 130s. So he beat bigger fighters, but he beat bigger fighters by not gaining any weight. So how does this come around to Errol Spence Jr. getting the last laugh, potentially on Terence Crawford? Because it seems like they're both one made that same mistake before, which was Errol. Errol probably made a mistake, other than the money, made a mistake staying at 147 at a weight that he did not feel comfortable with and not moving to 154 pounds earlier and fighting at 154, right? Because he kind of had that strain, but he stayed there to fight Terence Crawford. That was a bit of a mistake. Now, he may have lost anyway, but you get my point. He did not look good at that weight. So now you have Terence Crawford, who goes to 154. Remember, he's been at 135. He moved to 140, moved to 147, then he warmed to 154. Now, to go from 135 to 160, to go to 168, you still have 160 to 168, just like you had with Roy Jones Jr. You had light heavyweight, you had to skip cruiser, and you go to heavyweight. Well, let's say Terence Crawford goes there and he loses the fight to Canelo Alvarez, but he puts a lot of muscle on to get there. Well, what does he do next? Does he stay at 168? You know he won't stay at 168 because there's too many guys there that are too big. Well, if he comes back down, then you have the risk of him draining himself and having to deal with getting that muscle off his body. And you very well could see something happen to Terence Crawford that would not be a pretty sight. And because most of these guys do not go down in weight successfully. You can look at Chris Bird, the heavyweight from the early 90s. He eventually got back down to, I think he fought at light heavyweight. Did not look nearly as good at light heavyweight as he looked at heavyweight because he'd had his body in that position for so long. Now, Gervonta Davis has been able to jump up and, jump back down a little bit. But I think that's in a weight class that's a little bit easier to do because you're going from 120. You're only really dealing with 10 pounds. But when you're dealing with, because he's going from 130 up to 140, that's 10 pounds. And he didn't stay at 140. He came back down to 135, and he can still make 130. Unlike Terence Crawford, who's now at 154 and you're going to 168, that's 14 pounds. That's 14 pounds, and that's 14 pounds of muscle that he's got to put on. He can't put 14 pounds of just body fat on, otherwise he'll be slow and lethargic. But the question is, again, is what happens when he comes back down? You can say, well, Terence Crawford is going to retire after that fight. I guarantee you Terence Crawford is not going to retire on a loss. If he wins the fight, he very well may retire if he wins the fight. But if he loses that fight, more than likely he's going to want to continue to fight. But he's not going to be fighting at 168. He's going to go back down to 154 pounds. I'm going to be interested in seeing what happens with Jermell Charlo when Jermell Charlo comes back after having gone from 154 all the way up to 168 pounds. I don't think that he put a lot of weight on to do it, but still, if he did put that weight on, it's still going to be difficult for him to come back down and fight at 154 pounds. Somebody that also demonstrated this was Regis Prograis, because Regis Prograis changed diets and everything to stay at 140. And because he said, look, if I go to 147, my body gets used to that. I'll never be able to make 140 pounds again. So no, I'm trying to keep my body where that's my set weight. So people know about this. People understand this. And it's something that Terence Crawford, when he goes for the gusto, needs to be aware of. It's what Bernard Hopkins is saying to him, where he's like, look, man, don't just go up there chasing money, man. There's these guys, some of these guys are very dangerous. And I think coming from Bernard Hopkins, who is every bit as good a fighter as Terence Crawford is, or he was every bit as good a fighter as Terence Crawford was, he should see and learn from that experience because, it's very similar to Roy Jones Jr. and Bernard, where Bernard lost early in his career to Roy Jones. As a result of that, Roy Jones Jr. wound up, catapulting himself to the top of the pound for pound list while people kind of forgot about Bernard Hopkins. But Bernard Hopkins kept grinding at that weight class. And before you knew it, the top guy, one of the top pound for pound guys was Bernard Hopkins, not Roy Jones. It's not out of the realm of possibility for that same thing to happen with Errol and Terence. If Errol is using common sense and saying, okay, I'm not ready for a fight yet. Let me get my body all the way back. I was in a terrible car accident and actually got in a car accident and he had different injuries. If he can get his body together and he can make a nice little run at 154, who knows, man? He may actually be the guy that gets the last laugh, even though, the fight between he and Terence was so crazy, but crazy one-sided. Also, I wouldn't doubt that if Errol went slowly up to 160, that the rematch with Terence Crawford, especially if he comes down from 168, could be a lot different than that first fight. So the people that I talked to said, hey, man, they got to be careful about this weight. Get yo-yoing your weight. And even at a certain point in time, snacking those guys ain't going to be able to help you because they still going to be trying to put a bunch of muscle on you so you can absorb the body weight of the person that you're fighting. But at the end of the day, look, man, we'll see what happens. Please let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Deuces.